In 1997, a plane crashed in Guam, killing 228 people. 7 years earlier, another flight circled New York until its fuel ran out. 73 died. These incidents are usually filed away as technical failures or the results of a pilot making a catastrophic error. We treat them as tragedies that belong to a world far removed from our own. A closer look reveals something far more human. The voice transcripts don't show mechanical failure, they show a breakdown in communication. The people in those cockpits knew exactly how much danger they were in, yet the messages they sent to the ground were polite, restrained, and indirect. The situation deteriorated in the gap between what was known internally and the softened words that actually traveled across the radio. Identifying that gap requires looking at how we negotiate our own interactions. Before Avianca Flight 52 crashed, it had been delayed, rerouted, and held in patterns over the city. Fuel was no longer a background concern, it was an immediate, pressing reality. The co-pilot stayed in contact with air traffic control, communicating steadily and responsibly. He mentioned fuel concerns and hinted at urgency, but he stayed within the bounds of standard, professional politeness. This restraint prevented him from using the kind of language that interrupts a system. By remaining careful, he made it possible for the listener to underestimate the gravity of the crisis. Once you notice this specific type of restraint, the question stops being about aviation. It becomes about the quiet, everyday negotiations of human life. You see it in meetings where a flawed idea moves forward because no one quite names what is off about it. You see it in relationships where both people sense a misalignment, yet continue as though clarity would be more disruptive than silence. This behavior feels normal because our daily lives don't instantly collapse under the weight of a softened reality. We live with partial truths because the cost isn't immediate. If this pattern is so destructive, we have to ask why it remains so invisible. This communication failure hides because it arrives dressed as a virtue. It feels like being considerate, or like maintaining harmony in a space where disruption carries a social cost. Many of us are taught from childhood to be mindful of hierarchy. We are told to measure our words in the presence of authority, and to approach confrontation carefully, almost apologetically. Over time, these learned behaviors stop feeling like choices. They start feeling like core values. Beneath this respect is a layer of calculation. The focus shifts away from what is true and toward the potential consequences of speaking clearly. We ask ourselves if our words will create discomfort, or if we will be seen differently for being too direct. Interaction becomes a negotiation of what is acceptable rather than a search for what is real. Because everyone else is engaged in this same negotiation, the absence of clarity blends into the fabric of the room. The silence is shared, so it goes unnoticed. Moving past this requires looking at the internal mechanics of expression. This pattern is driven by internal permission, the perceived right to articulate what you see without diluting it. This includes naming discomfort without softening it, or expressing disagreement without cushioning it to invisibility. When that permission is absent, expression changes direction. What is not said externally settles inward. This inward redirection creates a persistent unease. It manifests as tension and anxiety, difficult to trace back to a single source, because they are the result of withheld clarity over time. In strict hierarchies, people learn to calibrate themselves constantly. Eventually, this self-restraint becomes so automatic that it is no longer experienced as a choice. It is simply the way things are done. Catastrophic failures rarely stem from a single mistake. They are the result of small, almost imperceptible hesitations that accumulate at the wrong moment. Most of us are not making life or death decisions in a cockpit, so our hesitations do not lead to a visible rupture or a sudden explosion. That lack of immediate consequence is precisely why the pattern continues. The cost is gradual, diffused across time, and absorbed into the way we understand ourselves. This requires looking at our own patterns without the comfort of abstraction. We have to identify not where others failed to speak, but where we continue to choose not to. Silence rarely announces itself as dangerous, which is why it is so easy to live with, even as it quietly reshapes everything around us.